Today, I'm going to add one amazing superstar using every NFL draft class. The goal is to construct a roster to compete for a Super Bowl in just one season, but we have to fill out the entire roster by using one player from every NFL team. This means we cannot add more than one player from the same NFL team to our roster, which will make this even more challenging. I put the last 40 NFL draft classes onto this wheel, and the first one lands on the 2014 draft class. The number one overall draft pick was Jadeveon Clowney, but we had some other really good players from this draft like Aaron Donald, Devontae Adams, Zach Martin, and DeMarcus Lawrence. This was a very tough choice, but I can't pass up on Aaron Donald, who's one of the best defensive players of all time. Now that we added our first player to the roster, we can no longer add another player from the Rams, and the 2014 draft class is removed from the wheel. And after spinning the wheel once again, we now have to pick a player from the 2022 draft class. There's a lot of players still active in the NFL, so I narrowed down my choices to Sauce Gardner, Aiden Hutchinson, or Garrett Wilson. This one's really tough, but I've decided to bring in Sauce Gardner as cornerback number 1 for our team. Let me know in the comments if I made the wrong decision with any of my choices here. The next wheel spin lands on the 2002 draft. They have some incredible defensive players like Julius Peppers, Dwight Freeney, and Albert Haynesworth, but Ed Reed is the only Hall of Famer from this draft class, so he's gonna be our starting free safety. If we are unable to fill a certain position on the team, we will have to sign a 70 or below free agent player to fill that spot, which will ultimately hurt our chances of winning a Super Bowl. Right into the next wheel spin, it lands on the 2020 draft class, and there are 4 quarterbacks taken in the first round, but you know I have to go with Joe Burrow as our quarterback number 1. Unfortunately, that means we have to pass up on Justin Jefferson, which is quite the bummer. And moving right into the next wheel spin, it lands on the 2015 draft class, and Jameis Winston was a first overall pick. But as we scroll down all the way to the 5th round, we are going to be bringing in Stephon Diggs, and he will be Joe Burrow's primary target, knocking off the Bills. The next wheel spin lands on 2003, and this one was a no-brainer. Bringing in Hall of Fame safety Troy Polamalu, and he'll fit alongside Ed Reed. Keeping this moving, the next player that we can add to our team has to be from the 2011 draft class. There are still a few active players like Patrick Pearson, Jason Kelce, Darius Slay, but let's beef up our offensive line for Joe Burrow and bring in Jason Kelce as our starting center. Spinning the wheel twice, and the 2 draft classes we can pick a player from are 2016 and 1989. For the 2016 NFL draft, we have 3 options in Jalen Ramsey, Derrick Henry, or 5th round pick Tyreek Hill. I really want to continue making our defense better, but I can't pass up on 99 overall Tyreek Hill, who will be wide receiver number 1, moving Stephon Diggs to wide receiver number 2. As for the 1989 draft, we have so many Hall of Famers to pick from, but I decided to go ahead and bring Barry Sanders in from the Detroit Lions, and he'll be our starting running back. With 9 NFL teams already knocked off, our offense is looking elite with Joe Burrow leading the way, and the defense is in great hands with Ed Reed and Troy P in the secondary. And after spinning the next wheel, it lands on the 2009 draft class, which is considered one of the worst of all time. Matt Stafford and Thomas Morstead are the only 2 active NFL players from the draft class, but I decided to bring in Alex Mack from the Browns, and he'll be our starting right guard for now. And I know he plays center, but our options were so limited here. The next draft class we have to go with is 2007, and unfortunately we can't bring in Calvin Johnson, Darrelle Revis, or Joe Thomas since we already used their teams, but there is a player that we can go with, and that's Patrick Willis from the 49ers. Moving this along, the next 2 wheel spins lands on 2005 and 1999. 2 relatively easy choices here, bringing in DeMarcus Ware, outside linebacker, who just recently was inducted into the Hall of Fame, and followed by another Hall of Famer in Champ Bailey at cornerback number 1, moving Sauce to cornerback number 2, knocking out the Cowboys and Washington, since those are the 2 teams that drafted them. After beefing up an already stacked defense, the wheel spin lands on the 2018 draft class. Lots of solid choices like Saquon Barkley, Derwin James, and Jair Alexander, but after looking at our roster, Quentin Nelson seems like the best choice, and he'll slot in at left guard. And right into the next wheel spin, it lands on the 2023 draft. It's still really early in their careers, but I really like Christian Gonzalez of the New England Patriots, and he'll slot in at cornerback number 3. Spinning the wheel once again, it now lands on the 1985 draft class. Would have loved to bring in Jerry Rice or even Bruce Smith, but we already used the Niners and the Bills, so I decided to go with William Perry from the Chicago Bears, and he'll be joining Aaron Donald on the defensive line. And just like that, we have knocked off half the NFL teams, and I'm really liking how our team is looking so far. An elite offense with plenty of weapons for Joe Burrow, and a defense that should have no problem getting a stop. We still have a lot of work to do on our roster, but the next wheel spin lands on the 2021 draft class. This draft class was loaded with talent, but I narrowed down the choices to Kyle Pitts, Rashawn Slater, Patrick Patrick Surtain or Nick Bolton. We don't have a tight end on our roster, so let's add Kyle Pitts. Moving on to a couple more wheel spins, it lands on 1996 and then 2017 right after. There was plenty of Hall of Famers like Jonathan Ogden, Ray Lewis, Brian Dawkins, and Marvin Harrison, but unfortunately we already used their teams, so I decided to go with Mike Allstott from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and he'll be our starting fullback. And as for the 2017 draft class, we could have gone with Patrick Mahomes, but we already have Joe Burrow. So let's help our offensive line and bring in Ryan Ramczyk. This team is really starting to come together, and the next wheel spin lands on the 2012 draft class. There are still a few active NFL players, but the one that stands out is Bobby Wagner of the Seahawks, and he'll fit right next to Patrick Willis. With just 12 NFL teams left, the next couple of wheel spins land on 2010, followed by 1998. I would have loved to bring in Trent Williams, but we already used the Niners, so I decided to bring in Jason Pierre-Paul, who won a Super Bowl with the Giants and the Bucs. And for the 1998 draft, you know I can't pass up on Randy Moss, and he'll slot in at wide receiver number 1. And spinning the wheel once again, it lands on the 2013 draft class. We can go with DeAndre Hopkins, but we already have a solid wide receiver core, so I decided to bring in David Bakhtiari from the Packers, and he'll slot in on our offensive line. Speeding this up a bit, the next two wheel spins land on 1986 and 2006. Since Bo Jackson was drafted first overall by the Bucs, but he never actually played a game with them, I'm going to count this as a Raiders pick, and we're going to bring in Bo Jackson as running back number 2 behind Barry Sanders. I'm also bringing in Antonio Cromartie at cornerback number 2 from the LA Chargers. Not many teams left, but the next wheel spin lands on 1990. The only player left from the remaining teams is Shannon Sharpe, and he'll replace Kyle Pitts at tight end number 1. With just 6 teams left, the next two wheel spins lands on 2008 and then the 2019 draft class. Not a lot of options here, but I decided to bring in Dwayne Brown, and then our left end, we have Brian Burns. And the next wheel spin lands on 2004. As I was looking through the draft, I knew it had to be Larry Fitzgerald. I know we have plenty of wide receivers, but tell me who was a better choice from the remaining 3 teams. Spinning the wheel twice, and it lands on 2000 and then 1987. The only 2 choices from the 2000 draft was Keith Bullock of the Titans or Dante Hall of the Chiefs. So I decided to go with Keith Bullock, and he'll go on our defensive line. As for the 1987 draft, we are stuck with another running back, but at least it's Christian Okoye of the Kansas City Chiefs. Jacksonville is the last team, and their first ever NFL draft was in 1995, so I went ahead and removed a few earlier years off the wheel, and it looks like it's going to land on 1995. Bringing in our last player in Tony Boselli on our offensive line. And just like that, our offense is looking amazing with Joe Burrow leading the way, and the defense should be able to win plenty of games. I did bring in some 70 overall free agents to fill some starter positions and backup positions, but let's just hope this doesn't hurt our chances at a Super Bowl. The opening game of the season didn't start off great as the Colts get on the board to tie the game. The team of draft classes figured it out in the second quarter where Joe Burrow connected with Randy Moss for a touchdown. Burrow went right back to Moss for a second touchdown of the first half, and they kept that momentum going in the second half, easily defeating the Colts by a score of 42-14. Joe Burrow ended up throwing for 300 yards and 5 touchdowns. They went on to win their next 6 games, and they're currently first in the NFL with a 7-0 record. Joe Burrow leads the NFL with 2,000 passing yards, 23 touchdowns, and just 2 interceptions, while Barry Sanders is crushing it. Let's just see if they can remain undefeated. And after simming the rest of the season, the team of draft classes are 17-0, earning themselves a first-round bye. Burrow managed to finish second with 4,700 passing yards, but he was able to throw 61 touchdown passes. Barry Sanders ended up with 2,000 rushing yards and 27 touchdowns, while Randy Moss, Larry Fitzgerald, and Shannon Sharpe combined for 45 touchdowns. And Aaron Donald had a great season with 20.5 sacks. We now take on the 11-6 Chargers in the divisional round. Joe Burrow was able to work his team down the field, and Barry Sanders was able to punch it in for 6 to take the early lead. Herbert and the offense quickly answered back with a touchdown of their own, but it didn't really matter as a team of draft classes were able to score again right before halftime, and they continued their dominance in the second half, moving on to the AFC Championship game. Next up is Lamar Jackson and the 12-5 Baltimore Ravens. And the opening drive started off great with a nice pass to Shannon Sharpe, but then Joe Burrow throws a costly interception in the red zone. Luckily, the Ravens only scored 3, and Joe Burrow started the comeback. First and goal, he finds Randy Moss in the end zone for the first touchdown of the game. Although Lamar got his team into the end zone to cut the lead down to 8, the team of draft classes kept their foot on the gas and closed the game out, winning 29-11 and are heading to the Super Bowl. Joe Burrow ended up winning NFL MVP, and Barry Sanders won Offensive Player of the Year. We now take on the 13-4 Cowboys in the Super Bowl, led by Dak Prescott. And DeMarcus Ware gets a huge sack on Dak Prescott on 3rd down. Barry Sanders was able to score a rushing touchdown, and then he followed it up with another 58-yard rushing touchdown. touchdown. And this game started to get out of hand with the team of draft classes scoring once again to take a 28-0 lead before halftime. The Cowboys tried to make a comeback with Tony Pollard getting into the end zone, but it was much too late as a team of draft classes end up winning the Super Bowl, completing the perfect 20-0 season. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you click on this one. YouTube thinks you'll like it, and so do I.